Thank you. All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, May 17th, 2022 meeting of the Morro Bay Planning Commission. We are live at the Veterans Hall on Surf Street. The meeting is now called to order. We have a quorum. We are missing Asia King, who will be joining us via Zoom. And we will start with a moment of silence. Thank you. And next on the agenda, we have added the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, next up we have Planning Commissioner announcements. Do any of the sitting commissioners have any announcements they'd like to make? I just wanted to say one thing, because we often don't sort of call out to folks in our city who are doing great, helpful things, and I just want to mention Gina Arias, who is in the Community Development Department, and I realized she's linked to both the Planning Division, the Building Division, and Code Enforcement. Always has my packets printed up and ready for me and ready to answer questions and sort of communicate between the folks in the Community Development Department. And she does a lot of great work, so just want to put it on the record. Thanks to Gina.
I'll second that.
Thank you. All right. And then, Asia, did you have any announcements or comments?
No. Nothing from me. Thank you for asking.
All right. Thank you. And you're coming in loud and clear. So up next, we do have a presentation. Brad Watson and Carolyn Atkins are here from Vistra, and he will take the podium.
Can I ask a question, Susan?
Sure.
Probably for staff. You know, we're going to listen in tonight, right, Scott? I mean, I don't expect that we'll have a chance to ask the questions we may have, which may be a long list. So we'll get this back, in other words, right? So we don't have to.
So this presentation is informational, and certainly the commission can ask a few questions of Mr. Watson if related to the presentation that's provided. I think that's appropriate, and we have time for that. So,
But according to our timetable, this will be back. If we want to really drill down on issues, we will.
He's just giving an overview of the project and status of Vistra Energy and introducing himself to you a little bit and that type of thing. So, questions along those lines are good. I think you don't want to really get too in depth into the project since you haven't seen it yet.
That's the point I was trying to make. Thank you.
All right.
Well, thank you, Chairwoman Stewart, Commissioners. Good evening. Good to see many of you again. Many of you I've met previously. Scott and staff, thank you very much for the opportunity to appear before you tonight to give you an update on our proposed battery storage project that we would like to put in at the retired Morro Bay power plant site. I'm going to run through a PowerPoint here. I'm going to start with what things look like now. As you can see, there's the retired tank farm site on the right, the stacks and the generation building in the left part of the frame of that picture, and then give you an idea of what it will be. Which way am I pointing here for? All right, how's that? No, it's not. There you go.
Do we need technical help? Mr. Technical.
And by the way, I'm batting 1,000. Appeared before the council last week, and that delay was about 45 minutes, and everything was out. If it's just a clicker this time, then doing better.
We're going to do better.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. but if not, we can just advance manually. Don't have to do it in my part.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. So I was just saying, I put on here a picture at the beginning of the presentation of what things look like now and what they could be looking like. This is one of the renderings that our engineering firm has produced of what the project as it was submitted to the city in the permit applications in December 2020. Visualize it to look like. Of course, we're not under any kind of assumption that the project would exactly look like this. It has to go through a lot of review, but just to give you an idea of what could be. So tonight I want to give you a bit of a refresher about our company, but also about the project as well. As many of you know, Vistra is a Fortune 275 company. We are based in Irving, Texas, in a suburb of Dallas. We are what's called an integrated energy company. That means that we own power plants and storage, and also that we sell it through our retail brands. We operate in 20 states. We only operate in states that have competitive power markets, like California. So we operate in those 20 states and also Washington, D.C. We are a leader in the energy transition from the U.S. grid from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And as a foundation for that, we have our own greenhouse gas emissions reduction plan. Our company has a goal of going to net zero carbon by 2050. We're on a metric right now to try to hit the milepost of 60% reductions off a 2010 baseline by 2030, and we're well on our way doing that. How we're doing that is spending billions of dollars right now building solar generation and battery storage in states where we operate, and also we are methodically retiring coal plants as well that we own and taking them out of our fleet. And we're doing it in a responsible way as well, trying to help those communities as plants are retired to help them to make a just transition. As far as California is an important state to us. There you see at the top part of this of the screen some of the retail brands that we have, but mostly our business here in California is centered on 3 power plant sites that we own: Oakland, Moss Landing, and in Morro Bay. In Oakland, we hope to soon retire a 110 megawatts of combustion turbines that run on jet fuel and replace that power generation with battery storage. In 2 phases, 43 megawatts or so in battery storage in a phase 1 that would be online in the summer of 2024, and about 36, almost 34 megawatts by summer of 2025. Moss Landing still has one of our operating natural gas plants. It's really critical to keep running right now in California. It powers more than 500,000 homes. But at that site is a large footprint of land. So what we've done in 1 phase is add 300 megawatts of battery storage. In a 2nd phase, 100 megawatts. And now in a 3rd phase, which is just starting construction, 350 megawatts of battery storage. It was just approved by the California Public Utility Commission. And we have plans for adding another 750 megawatts in that site. It's a large site. And then, of course, here at Morro Bay, we have proposed to the city to add 600 megawatts of battery storage in a portion of the retired Morro Bay power plant site. So let's get up to speed now on what's going on there. As I said, it's a 600 megawatt project. It would be powered with lithium-ion batteries that would take the extra generation during the day of solar and wind and store that during the day when demand is lower. And then when California goes into that net peak period from, say, 5 o'clock to about 9 o'clock in the evening, when the load is still about the same but solar and wind drop off, that's when the batteries here at Morro Bay would go a long way to helping solve this crunch right now in California in the next few years once we get these batteries online. For 4 hours, those batteries could power about 450,000 homes. The project would be on 22 acres of the tank farm site. We used to be the tank farm site next to the generation building and the stacks. And we think that the Morro site Morro Bay site remains ideal for battery storage because of its central coast location. The existing infrastructure is right there. As you know, the Department of Toxic Substances Control has placed a land use covenant on the tank farm site because of hydrocarbons that are in the soil. They've restricted it only to industrial use. So we think that project is perfectly suited for that. And of course, the PG&E substation is the direct tie into the CAISO grid. Additionally, the Morro Bay Energy Storage Facility would help advance the Central Coast in the drive to make the Central Coast region into a renewable energy hub. With the discussion of the Morro Bay Wind Energy Area and other projects, the retirement of Diablo and repositioning that with renewable energy in some way, we think the battery storage project here at Morro Bay helps add to that goal of economic development. And also, specifically for Morro Bay, the project with the right land use plan amendment, with a master plan that's indexed into it, would unlock the potential, finally unlock the potential of the entire site. With the right amendment, the battery storage would be built, then the demolition of the stacks and the generation building at Vistra's expense, I might add, and then the master plan in which whatever comes next, whatever the community and the city of Morro Bay decide they want to try to develop in that area for the remaining acres of that 107-acre site, then that could finally be realized. And that has huge potential for the city to finally move this area forward. While we're doing that, though, I want to give you a reflection of how market conditions have changed since we filed the application for this project in late 2020. Inflation that we're all seeing right now is hitting us, but additionally and specifically raw materials that are part of battery storage. Supply chain issues and also are also increasing the cost regarding building battery energy storage systems at this scale. I just checked before I came over here for what the year-over-year cost increases are for some of the raw materials that we see in batteries at this size. For example, lithium, 414% price increase year over year. Cobalt, 72%. Nickel, 47% increase. These ingredients are in the chemistry of some of these batteries, and so they're all going up. Additionally, with the systemic inflation that we're seeing economy-wide, not just in the United States, but also the world. So engineering, procurement, construction costs are higher. We are seeing in some of our projects up to a 40% increase in capital cost per kilowatt hour. That's the metric for the projects. While that is happening, we are still pursuing renewable energy projects in California and, of course, the other states where we operate. And as the awareness of what Vistra is doing in California spreads, we are now seeing other entities approaching us. Come look at potential opportunities that we have. Entities that own commercial property next to substations in other parts of the state. We've had an airport authority say, could you put batteries at one of our sites? So we are now starting to get unsolicited inquiries about putting batteries in other parts of the state of California. And of course, we're talking to these folks. It's just to say that Vistra, going forward, is opportunistically evaluating renewable energy investment dollars allocation by potential projects. We are excited about the Morro Bay project, but like all projects, it has to fit some of the criteria that we have to be built. One is it has to stay on schedule in a timely way. Any project, not just Morro Bay, but any project that faces a lot of delays is going to have an issue. The other thing is that if a project becomes costlier and more costs get layered on, and we can't realize the rate of return for a project, then something like that is going to be lower in our priorities. It could get marginalized as well. So, as I said, we're still excited about this project. We have spent a lot of time and we've spent a lot of money in preparation for the last couple of years. Our folks have been working very diligently with Scott's team as well to try to get to a point where we're ready to move forward in the CEQA process. All the requested technical work has been submitted, but as I say, time is critical. Time is critical. We are urging that the city get the issuance of a notice of preparation under CEQA out this month. And we're getting good indications from the city staff that will happen. And so we're just really respectfully asking the City Council, Planning Commission, and the staff, of course, to keep the process moving. I do want to address, because there have been questions, and they're good questions and understandable, an update on our Moss Landing battery storage facility. We brought that online in 20 and 2021. Unfortunately, we had a couple of events in which the projects had to be taken down offline in an unplanned outage. I can say that as of last week, Vistra announced that it expects to have a substantial portion of the 400 megawatts at Moss Landing back online for the summer. The entire facility will be back on during the summer. Corrective actions have been determined and implementation nearing completion. So that includes the replacement of connectors in the water-based heat suppression system and testing. So we anticipate that we'll have 200 megawatts available in early June in just a few weeks, another 150 megawatts coming on incrementally throughout the month. The remaining 50 will be operational in August. And of course, we continue to work with regulators, state and local officials to complete the restoration work comprehensively, properly, and safely. At the time of these two events, we said that we would investigate and we'd tell people what happened, to try to inform them transparently and fully what we found and what we're doing to correct what went wrong. And what we found in our investigations were that at the time of the first activation of some of the safety systems, all the battery modules were working properly. We're comfortable with that. We've confirmed that, so the batteries were working within their established temperature limits. Smoke detectors were alarmed, though, causing a release of water to the battery heat suppression systems. And then hoses on the heat suppression system unfortunately disconnected, and when that happened, water got on the batteries. So as far as corrective actions, we have completed repairs and commissioning. The quick connect fittings, which had been the cause of some of the hoses leaking water, will be replaced with threaded connections. The complete heat suppression system will be pressure tested. The system will be changed to what's called a dual interlock, so there'll be more than just one warning, if you will. The dual interlock requires both smoke and activation of battery module sprinklers to release water to the heat suppression system. That should eliminate activation of system by smoke that is not associated with battery overheating. And smoke detectors will be installed in all the air handling units to detect any smoke generated in air handling units or outdoors. So with that, it completes our presentation, and as Scott was saying, be happy to entertain any questions you have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Watson. Any commissioners have any questions? Okay.
First of all, thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
This is very exciting.
Hmm? Correct. No, we revealed that from the start, and it's been part of the presentation we did in the last year, and it's been probably in every forum we've done informally as well. PG&E, when it sold the site to Duke in 1998, put land use covenants on the entire site to protect itself from liability. For example, no hotels, motels, housing, daycares, healthcare facilities. I think there are a few others on there. Parks. I think there's some others on there as well.
So, Scott, just so I think it's important to say at every meeting, grab this microphone.
Hey, oh.
My fault. I think it's really helpful to say this at every meeting, so it's very clear, and especially in front of the Planning Commission. What other covenants are on the site, Scott? PG?
It has the PG&E covenant on there. There's,
The DTSC,
Yeah.
as far as I know, with its final order, only put a land use restriction on what was called area of concern number 1, which is
Okay.
the tank farm. For soil and water for the rest of the site, there are no restrictions. I
There's
want
like-
to confirm that, but I'm pretty sure that is correct.
and there's, I think the area underneath the stacks in the building also wasn't cleared. They said that would need more testing once demolition took place, right?
Yeah,
Something like-
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and so just, to make that one clear, too, it's not your responsibility, you haven't claimed it is, to do any clearance and cleanup of the site in terms of toxins.
One more time on that, please.
To do any kind of cleanup, mitigation around toxins in the soils, under the building, under the footings.
That
So
is
that
not-
would be one more step in terms of
It could be.
unlocking the potential.
There was
Yeah.
never any testing because the generation building is underground, and it's just this huge basement. If you've been through it, so you know what it looks like.
Yeah.
And I don't believe there was any testing under that. That was AOC 5, I think. And no, it would have to be for the whole thing to be removed. Although in demolition, I doubt if we would even take out the whole base.
Right.
Part of it would just be
And the
filled
point
in.
being for me is to unlock the potential of the
Mm-hmm.
site, it's going to take multiple steps, many of which you guys are not going to be involved in.
I hazard to get into exactly what we are going to do or not do, only because we got to get a project first. I will tell you, though, that it has sat there since 2014 with no development.
Yeah.
And there's been no credible plan to move it forward either. Yeah, there are going to be restrictions on it, and whatever would come next would have to deal with that.
Right. I'm just trying to make that clear.
But what we're hoping to do with the city to move this forward is to come up with a land use plan amendment that would, yes, unlock the potential. Now, would it unlock everything if it were just a dormant, pristine site? No. It's an industrial site or a former industrial site. But there would be a lot more potential there than what is there now if it just continued to sit.
Okay, it's a different way to say it, but I buy that.
Okay.
One other thing I wanted to say, you gave us some criteria, you talked about schedule and costs. These things, to return that to you, are very important to the city and to the Planning Commission as well. We understand schedule, and we understand certain things have to be accomplished before we can do all of yours, help you with your project. The master plan, could you tell us a little bit about that? And the master plan for the Planning Commission, I think, is very important, how we go about that, where that is on the schedule. We feel that that's a critical part, I think this commission does, of the schedule. We're also interested in the idea of a phased master plan that might help your schedule too, so that it's not a timeout for years, but it's a way of making sure we can move forward. Would you want to comment on that?
No, that will be part of discussions between Vistra and the city.
So when you talk to us about schedule, I guess I just want to get it out there too. I understand how schedule is important to you, but I think it has to be said. Schedule is important to the city and to this commission.
That's good to hear. We're all for that. We're all for the project moving forward at all deliberate speed.
Yeah, and I think
Once the sequence process starts, there are certain deadlines along the way
exactly.
for draft, comments, public input, and then a decision.
And my point would be that we're partners on making this work.
Absolutely.
Because the city can't just bend to your schedule without realizing an effective effort
Absolutely.
and a successful effort on our
When
schedule.
our CEO was here last year, he said, there's no way we can do this. Vistra can't do it by itself. We have to be partners on this.
Fantastic. And I guess my last thing would be, I know it's an industrial effort, but I think this is a commission that's also very concerned about architecture, urban design, landscape, fencing. down to the details of what kind of mechanical stuff we might see on the roof, right? How does the project appear? And I know that's in the future, but I'd love to encourage you to think, to understand the priority that I think this commission will put on the architecture, urban design, and landscape.
It will all be part of the project description.
Great. Thanks, Brad.
No, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. And I want to sort of piggyback on that and just point out to the community that every step of the way with this, there will be opportunities for public input.
Many opportunities.
So Vistra is not going to come forward with, here's your master plan to our city. Our city will be, and by our city, I mean you in the audience, the people who live here will be part of and have input on that master plan. I do think Vistra has been very forthcoming this whole time with doing public meetings and getting input from folks. So I do appreciate that. Mike, did you have any questions?
Yeah, I'm just going to limit mine to two, but important ones. First, thank you, Mr. Watson, for the presentation. You talked about the investigation and the findings.
Yes.
Who was the oversight agency that you reported to on the findings for the investigation?
We reported them to the North County Fire District of Monterey County. That would be Chief Joel Mendoza, in part. And also, we have reported findings to the CEC, the CPUC.
Okay, good. I was looking for the CPUC since they regulate energy. So they would be
Yes.
the oversight agency at the state level. I don't know if FERC got involved or not, but I just want to clarify.
We have so many alphabets,
Yeah.
letters in the
Yeah.
soup we deal
Yeah.
with that have been informed
Yeah.
on this. It looks like alphabet soup. But yes,
Yeah.
we have informed FERC, CAISO, CPUC, CUC,
Okay. Yeah, the two I was
CEC.
the two I was most concerned about were PUC, since they'll be part of the oversight as well as your rate making.
Right.
They're going to be part of that rate making process. FERC, because they want to be involved in all energy.
And I might add for context also, Commissioner, because you touched on a good point.
Yeah.
That we have informed them. They've been out to the site. They have seen Moss 300. They have seen 100 just recently. And they're still confident in what we're doing because we signed a new resource agreement for Moss 350 with PG&E, and then the CPUC approved that just a few weeks ago.
Okay, good. Glad to hear that. Yeah, because when you were mentioning costs, obviously the PUC is going to be the primary player in determining what your rate of return and your cost structure will look like ultimately. So they're going to consider all of the things you're going to submit as part of the rate making process. So that's going to be really, and it'll be at the state level, right? You're going to establish your rates at the state level
Yes,
through the PUC.
the resource agreement is with PG&E.
Okay, so it'll go through PG&E.
Well, the resource agreement is with PG&E, and is ultimately approved by the CPUC.
Exactly. So, and that was another clarification because obviously you're concerned about costs. So I just wanted to see how that process is going to work.
Yes, sir.
So good. And then the other thing is, this is fairly new technology as far as the world's concerned, right? We would have been the biggest one if you had us on the map in the world. We would have been, based upon what I read in the papers, we
Yes.
would have been the biggest
Yeah.
type of facility like this in the world. Right now, Moss Landing's the biggest. Now, so given that it's fairly new technology, will the findings of your investigation be included in the CEQA report? Because obviously that's going to be used by others when it comes to this kind of technology issues, what to look out for, environmental quality issues.
I would be pretending if I told you I was a CEQA expert. I can't tell you whether it will be in the CEQA report or not.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I will tell you that from the outset, our company has been committed to find out what happened and why, what are the corrective actions, and share it with others. All right? Because you're right, it is developing technology. And just like these mobile phones we all carry now, I remember in 1990 when the first ones came out, they looked like military walkie-talkies. The technology advances. There are new developments. Things are learned along the way, and as much as one can put all their effort into what you think is a great design, serendipity, the alignment of the stars, fate, whatever you want to call it, will point out something that you didn't think of, right? And so we learned some things along the way. We've shared all of that. We are applying that in what we are doing, and we are certainly willing to inform and help shape future projects by what we have learned as well.
Yeah, and that's what I was hoping for, because obviously if we're headed in that direction, we don't want this kind of information in a CEQA document, because it'll help us as we move forward with more of this. And I would expect that the California Environmental Quality Act would call for this, this kind of finding, your kind of findings during your investigations as part of its reports.
Well, again, I'm no expert, but whether it does or doesn't, our company's number one priority is safety. The project will be safe. It will meet UL 9540. It will meet 9540A, which is the rigorous testing protocol for battery storage. It will be safe. If there's any question for some reason that it's not, we wouldn't move forward. It's got to be safe, regardless of whether there's any kind of regulatory requirement or not.
Thank you. Joe, did you have any questions?
I did. I think I've already heard the answer to my question, but and again, I'm a layman in these matters, but it seems that Vistra is taking what I call a holistic approach, in that any initial agreement about permission to locate the battery facility will also include the agreement to demolish the plant and mitigate any of the environmental problems that might be associated with what's underneath the plant. Is that a fairly accurate description of what I heard? Or is my question too vague?
Well, I hesitate to get into details that haven't even been negotiated yet. But as Community Development Director Graham has mentioned previously to you, there's a master plan requirement as part of Plan Morro Bay and the OUP, which we feel can be folded into the land use plan to get this thing going. Once the project is built, we've listened to the community, and what we heard was, we feel that if Vistra just builds the batteries, the rest of the balance of the 107 acres may not be developed or pursued, or will be later. So we listened and we said, okay, we understand that this has to move along in tandem almost. So, Commissioner, at this juncture, without having a lot of details, what our goal is to come up with the right plan, gets the batteries built, and then, just because of logistics, then the demolition of the stacks and the generation building. And then once that site is cleared, we'll see what's under the generation building, if it's a factor. I can tell you that there's asbestos in there. That'll have to be remediated, and we'll do that properly according to state or federal regulations, whatever it takes. But once that's done, then we'll see what else is at the site. And then, we're not a development company, but we understand that this community wants to finally take a bold step with this site and do something with it. Now, there may be land use covenants on it, but innovative and creative minds in this community, and there are many, are going to think about what else can we do there. And that's what we want to be a part of and help facilitate and move forward with.
Fine.
We're not in a position to give you details yet, but as far as what our broad goals are, I think we can be clear that we want to try to, yes, get our project done, but we've listened to this community that the rest of the site has to move forward, again, unlocking the potential. Not all things that could be there, but the potential, given what former industrial site that has some, land use covenants on it by one of the previous owners, who still has a critical substation that, 30-some acres sitting in the back of this is put on it. But that there's something that really good can happen there. Now, what it is, I don't know. But it's got to be better than what is sitting out there right now.
I see. So again, it might be fair to characterize it then in terms of binding agreements. The agreement might go, as you say, to the demolition of the plant, and perhaps it stops at that point, at this point anyway, in terms of what you're envisioning as the first of maybe multiple agreements. Is that
Well,
correct?
there's been, Scott knows, there's been an MOU that's already been agreed to by the city and Vistra about demolishing the stacks. We left it up to the city, and they came back last year in a vote after a lot of community input and said, we are going to release Vistra to go ahead and demolish the stacks. We have said that we intend to do that. And by 2027, if for some reason we didn't, there's a $3 million penalty. But, we look at this now, as I said, to get our project done, demolish, part of the master plan. What's next as part of that?
And is the demolition of the plant also within that 2027 limitation?
There's a requirement that it has to be done by the end of 2027
Right.
in the MOU that has already been agreed to.
Okay. And then the second question I had was, it was my understanding that the California Coastal Commission has a policy about not wanting to locate industrial developments very near the coast unless they're coastal dependent. So how are you going to overcome that obstacle, or do you regard this project as coastal dependent?
Well, no, that was changed. That was changed with Plan Morro Bay being adopted by the city and certified by the Coastal Commission, that it changed the land use plan, or land use from coastal dependent industrial to visitors serving commercial. So that means we've got to have a land use plan amendment and a master plan to go into that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Asia, do you have any questions?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Loud and clear.
I think that maybe Scott might be able to help answer my question. I guess I'm just wondering what the typical approach is to land use covenants. If how set in stone are land use covenants? For this one in particular, what are the implications of that land use covenant going forward as we talk about a master plan and potential things in the future? And how does the city typically deal with that? And then another question after that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of speculation involved with that. I mean, we would have to engage PG&E if we wanted to put anything else out, if we, Vistra, wanted to put anything else out on the site that wasn't permitted by the land use covenant, meaning we'd have to work through them with that. It's not dissimilar to what Vistra did, say, with DTSC. They had a bunch of reports that said that areas on the site were clean when DTSC thought that they were not clean, and they provided that information to DTSC, and DTSC said, oh, okay, we'll take a new look at it, and then cleared those other areas. So it could be something along those lines if we went down that road, and it would have to be something along those lines. It would have to be a negotiated type thing. We would have to sit down with PG&E and probably work through what it would look like to change the covenant if they'd even be willing to. We haven't had those discussions yet. I think that's what you were asking.
Yeah, yes, that makes sense. My second question is, I guess, in hopes of getting a little bit better educated on our sources of electricity. The presentation had solar and wind electricity as a goal, or as a way of generating electricity for the plant to store. And so I guess I'm wondering, how does this project interact with the wind farm? What are the implications of that wind farm on this battery storage plant? I think I just need more information.
Yeah, and that's a good question. And we get a lot. Quick primer. California has an abundance, probably an exceedance of solar and wind generation during the day. And if you don't use it, you really lose it. That's why it's renewable. It's intermittent. The battery storage takes that solar and wind off of the grid during the day and stores it. So it can be used later when demand is higher and generation is dipping lower. Now, regarding the Morro Bay wind energy area that the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management is looking at, the Department of the Interior and others, if that were built, it would be another source of generation, renewable generation in California that would be connected to the California grid, most likely right over here through Morro Bay, across our property into the PG&E substation. That's why that substation is vital, because it ties it into the grid. That wind energy would come into the grid and then be dispersed. Now, we wouldn't have a direct line, if you will, from turbines out in the ocean to our battery storage. We would take it again right off the grid. But if those turbines, and that's the whole purpose of offshore, is it's more constant. The capacity factor is higher than it is on land for wind. So if there were excess, whatever hour of the day, and our batteries can store it for discharge later, we'll do it. That's how it works.
Sure. That makes sense. So I guess I'm just wondering what it means for Vistra as a company to be a sustainable energy company. What does it mean to be solar and wind powered, as mentioned in the presentation?
Well, we think our project complements what the Morro Bay wind energy area is about. Look, you want to get to that capability of having enough renewable energy and storage so that it's not just, sunrise to sunset, but you have enough storage that you can begin to build out a 24/7 service day, right? And so you don't have to rely on fossil fuels as much. Now, there takes a lot of development and a lot of more renewable energy construction and battery storage, but it's coming. There's no shortage of cheap capital in the world right now for building these projects. We have had no problem raising capital to build what we are right now. Some off our balance sheet, but also there are a lot of dollars out there looking for quality, credible, renewable energy projects all over the world. So the construction is happening. It is developing. And the idea is, as plants retire that are fossil fuel plants, that you get more renewable, you store it, and begin to fill in. It's a transition. As you in California are knowing, sometimes you might wish you had more dispatchable stuff that's reliable, but that's where we're going as a nation with our grid and our electricity generation sources. So, and we're part of that. We are building out California, Texas, Illinois, Ohio, Pennsylvania. And one thing we have found as extremely valuable is that these retired power plant sites, or the ones that are still operating, we could put renewable energy on them, either solar if the footprint is big enough acres, or battery storage. And it goes to the heart of sustainability. We're taking something that was built during the 20th century for fossil fuels and repurposing it, just like the Morro Bay plant. Don't have to put in any more transmission lines, substations right there. Don't have to cross more land, raise more money, try and build more large poles and wires and all. Let's reuse this stuff. So that's what we're trying to do, and that's part of the conversation.
All right, thanks so much.
Thanks,
You're
Asia.
welcome, Commissioner.
All right. I appreciate this presentation, the opportunity to share the information with the community. I think we can move on. If everybody's ready.
Thank you.
You so much.
Thank you, Chairman.
We are moving on to public comment. This is a time for people to comment on things which are not on the agenda, or if they're on the agenda and you cannot stay until they come up. We have 3 minutes. We will be timed. We'll start first with people who are here in the audience, and then we will go to whoever might have phoned in or Zoomed in. So, who wants to go first? Charisse, come on up.
I don't really want to go first, but hi, good evening. Thank you for having me. Asia, Bill, Joseph, Mike, Susan, I'm glad that I can be here and able to have this opportunity to speak. I'm here because I need a little bit more time with one of you, and it's based on this. My name is Sharice Hansen. I am a master leaseholder on the Harbor Walk Plaza, which is in development right now, if you noticed it. And I also neighbor the Libertine, which is a future agenda item that you guys have been looking at and will continue to do so. I am spending over $4.6 million on my project next door to the Libertine, and feel that my voice should be heard by the commission, especially by the commission, when it comes to my neighbor's project and how it affects me on the Embarcadero and the cohesive connection between our properties. I know that there is a subcommittee tasked with the Libertine project, and the best scenario is to have a discussion longer than 3 minutes with the two on the subcommittee. Another thing as well, I'm also the Harbor Advisory Board chairwoman, I like how I said that, and have some concerns that affect the harbor with this development as well. These also would be best voiced with the subcommittee first before I go and speak to the other committee members, commission members. As you have stated before, and I think it was 2 meetings ago, that my project that I and my husband designed is now a template for a positive and complete public benefit project. No additional requests to our property were required by the Planning Commission. I know what the community and travelers want when it comes to our beautiful harbor. I also know where some items considered public benefit are still needed. My husband's family has had businesses on the Embarcadero since 1952. My kids are growing up here. I've had my business under the Sea Gallery for 24 years, located at 833 Embarcadero, which I now am the master leaseholder of. I started my business with my own money and learned from the ground up how to flourish in Morro Bay. My father-in-law bestowed on me all his wisdom of this town and its history. He's a big reason why I am so active in city government, because he made me know that my voice could be heard if it was listened to. We also have a tentative letter of interest in operating the hotel rooms on top of the Libertine, in addition to the 8 rooms we are developing next door, which would have a very great synergistic effect for a very viable business on the waterfront. This is another reason it is imperative to understand what is possible with the Planning Commission on approval and meet with both of the commissioners. The current leaseholder has been sent in a new direction. The new direction would increase a small portion of view from the bluff, but my concern is that there is much better ways to increase public enjoyment, ways to improve everyone's experience of Morro Bay and this unique property, that allow low-cost rooms with a view. Low cost is not supposed to be low quality. This needs to be a place where you can get an amazing experience at a low rate. There are more ways to enjoy the bay, not just with your eyes, and I know how to get that for this project. Not just view access, but water access. Areas to relax, not just Chevy chase the Grand Canyon and stand there for a few minutes and walk away. It is my wish to optimize the public's enjoyment of my area. Well, it is, well, and the neighboring properties. We are a collective unit and should reflect similar quality and amenities for all. I will be here for decades to come, and I want the Embarcadero, this part of me, to be the best. So I have more, but I would like to meet with the committee members and maybe both of you on the subcommittee members together. I'd appreciate that.
Thank you, Sharice.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else in the audience for public comment at this point? Welcome, and if you could introduce yourself, if you don't mind.
I think everybody knows me, but my name is Terry Simons, longtime resident of Morro Bay. I have a construction development business. And, excuse me, but was the prior presentation from Vistra on an agenda?
It was on the agenda as a presentation.
Okay, I just missed it. It felt so much like a public hearing that I felt the need to get up and comment on it that I resisted.
It's okay, we're not there yet.
We
will
I'm
have
sure we
lots
will
of
be.
opportunities for that.
Okay, well, that was basically what I was going to comment on about that. I might as well, since Vistra got there, say I'd like to throw my hat in the ring. When they start talking about the secondary uses, one of the things I've been very committed to over the last number of years is finding a site for a boat haul-out repair and maintenance facility. And I was just speaking with Mr. Watson and his assistant outside, and he's agreed to take information from me about using the front portion behind the gate and that existing little office building as a future maritime repair and haul-out facility, because it's immediately adjacent to the ocean and is a perfect place to build ways. I've been working with the harbor master for years on this. And anyway, I was excited about that. He seemed to be receptive as much as anybody can be when you throw something at him at the last second. So, and just lastly, I'm at sixes on which way to go with the whole Vistra program, but I do drive a Chevy Bolt all-electric vehicle powered by lithium batteries. It's currently under recall because of potential battery problems, but I'm not fearful. I think that lithium technology can be made safe, but I'm not ready to really support the Vistra project at this point. And I look forward to more information, as was pointed out by other members of the Commission. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Maybe one of the good things would be that you could charge your car at night with the free or affordable. Oh, perfect. So you're set. All right. Ms. Winholtz.
Evening, Betty Winholtz. I wanted to raise the question to see if you've already considered or if you are going to put it on your agenda, the idea about how our county, Los Osos and Cambria in particular, but other cities now in the county are considering moratoriums on building due to water shortages. And so at what point will the Planning Commission be involved with that or not, or is that strictly a city council issue? But it seems to me it would be vetted at the Planning Commission first.
Thanks, Betty. We'll address that when public comment is done. I think we could give a fairly quick answer to that. Anybody else in the audience for public comment right now? AGP, do we have anybody waiting in the queue?
Thank you, Chair. I have no right.
All right. So we'll close public comment for now. Scott, do you want to respond to the water question?
Yeah, the city reviews the water equivalency unit process as well as the state of the city's water resources yearly, and we issue a number of water equivalency units for development in the city. That meeting, that item will be coming for the Planning Commission in June. I'm not sure if it's going to be the first or second meeting, but it is coming. So we'll at least start that commission, and then there'll be recommendations that move forward to City Council. I believe that report also goes to PWAB as well, Public Works Advisory Report. So it would be heard by PWAB, Planning Commission, and then the City Council.
That's what I recalled.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Since we're on the topic, Scott, is that a state law now? Because I know electricity was the first one on board with when you did developments, you had to consider your electricity use. Now you've got to consider your water use because we're out of both.
You always do, but the water equivalency unit program stems from a referendum that was put in place many years ago.
A state referendum or a?
No, for city, in the city.
Okay,
Yeah.
because so it hasn't gotten to the state level yet where it's a state law to require developments to consider water.
Of certain sizes, you are required to go to the water purveyor and get will serve letters, basically. So.
Okay. All right. Anybody have any other things that they heard in public comment that we need to refer back to staff? I didn't note anything down. Okay. Let's move along to our consent calendar. We have 2 items, the current and advanced planning processing list, staff recommendation to receive and file, and then our minutes from March 1st, which we would move to approve. I guess we could open this for public comment. Anybody have any comment on the consent calendar? And AGP, anybody waiting in the queue?
Thank you, Chair. Great hands in the queue.
All right, so we will close public comment on that. Do we have a motion on, or questions on the consent calendar?
I was going to go ahead and make a motion
Okay.
to approve the consent calendar.
Excellent. A second?
Sure, I'll second that.
All right, Joe's the second, Mike is the move, and Scott, you want to call the roll?
Sure. Commissioner King,
Yes.
Commissioner Rodriguez,
Yes.
Commissioner Graffia,
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Roshan,
I'm going to abstain because I was absent at that meeting.
Chairperson Stewart.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1. Thank you. 4-0.
Thank you. So we'll move on now to our public hearings. Item B1 is 2995 Beachcomber Drive. We have Ms. Nancy Hubbard here to present.
Getting the slideshow up for you guys. Just give me a second.
So while Scott is working on that, I wanted to bring up a couple of things in the materials that were provided in the agenda. On the agenda, item B1 says staff recommendation is continue the project to date uncertain. That's left over from February, 3 months ago. So the staff report has the correct recommendation. The staff report, however, on the cover has 2 dates that are also left over from February. So I guess that's a risk of continuances. The rest of the staff report is updated for today's meeting. Okay. So we're here to talk about 2995 Beachcomber and a coastal development permit. Site information, it's a 8,210 square foot lot. It's zoned R1, sub area S2A, and it has a portion that is OAPD. The property has frontage along the coastal dune. Coastal access alley is on the north side of the property, and the home was built in 1967. This is an illustration of the dual zoning on the site, the R1 portion and then the OA portion. Historic building assessment, the home was evaluated and found that it did not meet the criteria for historic preservation. These are 2 photos from the report. Coastal hazards review, the coastal dune setback requirement was reviewed and determined not to interfere with the proposed project. Sea level rise analysis was also performed and concluded no risk under the current review standards for the 100-year review period. And this is illustration of the coastal dunes, which unfortunately are held back away from the homes by the ice plant. Summary of the proposed additions. This is not quite the same colors as I intended, but the blue outlined squares are the additions. So there's the face of the west portion of the house that's been extended. There's the entryway, kind of going left to right. There's an expansion of the bedroom, and then there's an unconditioned entry feature. They're also adding an ADU, which of course is ministerial and not part of this review. The zoning and overlay area development standards, the center column is the standards, and the proposed project meets or exceeds all of the standards. Character of the neighborhood. Many homes are either new or have had significant updates, resulting in a blend of modern homes and mid-1970 homes. The subject property exterior modifications fit within the neighborhood character. This is material boards, so they're, again, the colors are not so accurate in these, but they're earth tones, so greens and browns, and they will look nice on the site. And the staff recommendation is for approval of the Coastal Development Permit CDP 21-044 pursuant to the findings and conditions of approval included in Planning Commission Resolution 02-22. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you. That was brief. Do we have any public, or do we have questions for staff first from the commissioners? Joe?
A question arose in the correspondence that I saw, and the question was, the existing porch on the west side, is that being extended the appropriate amount, because some of that porch area is being consumed by the extension of the dens. So is the porch going to ultimately, the porch roof ultimately going to push out further?
I'd have to look at the plans, but I mean, they're extending that portion of the west wall for interior living space. They're staying within the setback.
Right. But when I looked at the plan, I couldn't tell. I couldn't even tell whether there was a new porch that was being constructed. I guess the porch roof was being constructed. I'm fairly certain there is. And that roof would extend a little further into the ice plant area?
No, none of the home is extending past the residentially zoned portion of the property.
Okay.
It's meeting the setbacks, and the setbacks are determined by the residential zoned portion of the property.
So the porch roof will not extend any further than it currently does. Is that what I'm?
It
will extend further.
It will stay within the setbacks.
Right. But it will
in the
extend,
R1 zoned area.
But it will extend further than it exists right now.
I can't tell you that for sure, but I think the applicant is here.
Okay. And then this is a question for Scott. It's not really particularly relevant for this, but with respect to the state prohibitions against any kind of barriers in the event of sea rise, does this resolution actually get recorded in the collection of titles for the property? I guess I'm getting to what kind of notice the successive buyers have. I realize they should be aware of a state law, but when they would actually research the title, would they see a document that says you cannot bury your property?
The resolution does not get recorded against the property. If this were in an area that would be subject to wave inundation, say, in the next 50 years, I think the land use plan requires recordation of a deed restriction that said if it was put in that you would have to remove it.
Okay.
It's your cost.
Thanks, Joe. Nothing, Bill? Nothing, Mike? Asia, do you have any questions for staff?
I don't. Thank you.
All right, then we will now open public comment on this project. Come on up.
Okay, good evening, commissioners. My name is Eddie Herrera. I'm the architect on it, and I wanted to first of all say thank you for taking the time to review this project. My client's been anxiously awaiting what the COVID laws kind of being lifted. They were eager to be here. Unfortunately, just with the timing of it all, it just didn't work out. We're trying to get in here last month, but here we are. Here I am, and so I'm happy to answer any questions. I know that there's one out there outstanding about the roof line at the back, and to answer the question, there are existing posts. We're going to be building out to the existing post. The eave will currently is at 18 inches deep. We're going to be at, I believe, 22'6" deep because we're not doing a covered porch on that, which is going to go out to the post. But the structure itself will be outside of the setback. So.
Thank you for that. As long as we have you up here, any questions for the architect? No? All right, we will let you sit down and see if there's any other public comment.
Sounds great.
Thank you. Anybody else? Ms. Winholtz?
Yes, Betty Winholtz again. It was really hard for me to understand the west side and what we were just talking about in terms of the porch. When you look at it, it was in the picture, and I went and looked at it in person. There's a very narrow porch on the west side, and I'm assuming the posts that you're referring to are those at the edge of the concrete, because there's an obvious line along all those houses on Beachcomber that they don't cross. And I guess I just want to hear, because I don't understand the language of the what do they call it, the residential barrier or the residential line, and I think Ms. Hubbard used it, and I'm still, the zoning boundary for the R1, is that the line where everybody currently is at? And so that won't get crossed, or like, will the porch get pushed out beyond that line? But no, they can't do that. And so I know that there's that ice plant there. I know that there's been other cases in the past further up to the north where there were issues about how far out you can go into the ice plant. So if someone can draw me a picture or something, that would be great. I understand that we aren't talking about the ADU, but the picture that's presented in the staff report has the garage, it has the entryway, but then there appears to be a room here. And is that the ADU? Because I thought the ADU was detached. And so I'm just confused about whether it's an attached or detached ADU. And I think it's okay to answer that question. And obviously, the tree in the front yard, I've answered my own question. It looks like it's going to have to be removed because of the ADU. So what else do I want to know about that? And a big issue for me is that public access on the north side of the lot. So there is no public access at this point unless it's outside the fence line, which then appears to be on the neighbor's property, or is the public access inside the north fence line, which is currently blocked by vegetation and a gate. And if it's true public access, it seems to me it needs to be posted as such so people will know that it's there for them to use. And so I'd like to know about that. And that whatever confusion you can straighten me out with regard to the ESHA buffer and then the R1 residential boundary line. Thanks.
Thanks, Betty. Anybody else for public comment on this issue? AGP, do we have anybody phoning in? You're sort of fuzzy, but I think that was a no?
Yes, that was no.
Okay, thank you. So I'll close public comment. I think we could bring this back to staff. We may want to call up the architect. As far as the tree is concerned, it is in the picture. It looks like it stays. It looks like the ADU is behind the tree.
That's correct.
And my way of reading the plans was they've created a covered entryway that divides the ADU and the house. So it's not exactly attached, but a way for people to enter either property undercover. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so hopefully that answers that question. Could you address the public access issue as they're meant?
Susan, before we go
Yes.
there, I don't quite understand that in the plan either. Is the property?
Which part, the connection or the
plan
tree?
that shows the new pieces. The ADU looks like it's right on the property line. So is the tree in front?
It's at the
Yeah, the
setback.
tree's right here.
So the tree's not shown on the plan?
The tree is not being removed.
It's shown on the plan.
It's shown on the plan.
It's shown
So
on
where is
site
the
plan
tree?
A1.
I mean, it's not on the property?
It's right there.
Well, I see it in
Here's the
rendering, but
ADU.
I don't see it on the plan, so I'm trying to understand.
It's on the site plan. It's on the site plan, sheet A1. The ADU is on that.
No, he's asking about the tree.
The tree's on that too.
Yeah, it's right here.
It's,
Okay, so this plan that shows is not the complete site?
Well, right here is the tree.
I mean, if it's, it doesn't say whether it's staying or going though, Commissioner Roshan, so we could ask the applicant that.
Got it.
Yeah, it does show it on the plan.
It's on the site and it's shown, okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
Okay. I guess we could ask the applicant, is the tree staying or going?
No, it's going to stay. Our client loves the tree.
So for the benefit of the viewing audience, the tree is staying.
We want to take care of that tree.
Yeah, it's a beautiful tree, gorgeous tree. Hang on to that tree. We need trees. Okay, so back to the ESHA question and then the public access question.
The public access, it was created as part of the subdivision, and it was for long blocks to give pedestrian access between streets. The westerly street was never developed. And so there's this 8-foot access alley that is an easement, but the property owners on either side own to the center line. And it's outside of the north fence of this property.
Okay.
And in previous conversations with the city engineer, it's get this, the subdivision was from 1924,
Okay,
so
yeah.
predates coastal commission and all that kind of good stuff. And so the easement itself is really in favor of the folks that live in the subdivision. It's not like a public access easement that you would get, say, on a waterfront project or something along those lines to provide public access to the water. And in fact, the area beyond these lots, right, where you can't develop, where you get into the open space and you get into the esh, we really don't want people blazing trails through that. That's not a good thing.
Right.
So.
Are there other easements, Scott, like this one on that block or in those areas?
There is another one in the area. I
Yeah.
think it's
And
north.
how is it used, Nancy?
Oh, I didn't go there today.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Don't know.
I just know there is another one. There is.
They're
another
the same. I mean, I think they're usually
But
not.
it doesn't provide public access?
No.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, when I looked at the property today, I would say 200 yards to the north, there is an access way, I guess a duplicate.
Yeah.
And you walk on a trail, and that will take you to the beach. But again, you can't walk on the dunes because that's a protected area for the plovers and other such. But there is another access a little bit to the north.
Susan, this
Yes.
is Ada. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm just have a quick question. Wondering about the ice plants. What the if there are like building codes or regulations around those ice plants? I know they're invasive, and I just don't know the details on that. So I'm wondering how that might interact with this project as well.
Asia, you and I tend to think alike because I was wondering if you wanted to do ice plant remediation, because it is such an invasive species and yet it's in this protected dune area, would someone be able to address that?
We'd probably have to work a solution out for that. You know, I've had recent conversations with the Coastal Commission about that, and just asking them in general how they treat areas that would otherwise likely have. I mean, I don't know, but I would guess that would have dune habitat on it if it were not for the ice plant. Mm-hmm. And they say what they end up doing is looking at the soil type underneath it to see if that's the case. But they do often support remediation efforts along those lines. Somebody wanted to do it. We have no requirements in our codes to do those types of things, but we probably could, go through a waiver process to allow somebody to do something along those lines if they were interested in it with concurrence from the Coastal Commission.
Okay. Asia, do you have any other questions?
That was my only one. Thanks for that answer.
Perfect. All right. Anybody else on the commission? We ready to make a motion?
Maybe I do have one question.
Okay.
What is the issue on the detached ADU? Is that a requirement?
There is a distinction. In this case, either would be allowed.
Either would be. Because the entry is actually interior space? Who's the architect?
It's not conditioned space.
It's a breezeway. So the door you're showing at the back is a gate?
Yes.
Got it. Yeah, I'm ready to make a motion to approve staff's recommendation.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mike. Any discussion on the motion? Asia, any discussion?
Nothing extra, no.
All right, thank you. All right. Nancy, would you like to?
Yes. Commissioner Rodriguez.
Yes.
Commissioner Ingraffia.
Yes.
Commissioner King.
Yes.
Chair or Vice Chair Roshan.
Yes.
And Chair Stewart.
Yes. All right. Thank you, everybody, and thanks to the architect for coming. All right. Our next hearing is B2, 197 Main Street. Nancy will also be presenting on this one.
I think the screens are buffering.
There we go.
Now they're back. All right, this is a public hearing to consider approval of a new, very small home located at 197 Main. The site location of the zoning, this site also has dual zoning. It's R1 PD above the bluff and waterfront PD below the bluff. There's no frontage for this site. It's not on a public street. Its access is from an easement on the north, and it's referred to as Sandpiper Court. In this image, I'll go back to this image. This is an aerial of the site, shows the outline in blue, and the red line going across is the approximate bluff area. Historic site information: the site is 2,500 square feet and it's pie-shaped. The access easement was part of the 1924 subdivision currently owned by the city of Morro Bay. There is an existing building along the waterfront portion of the site. Site constraints. I don't think I'll use yellow anymore. It's really hard to read. The 20-foot bluff setback where there's no structures allowed, and there's a three-foot side yard. Boy, you can't see that at all. Setback on the sides, and actually the 3-foot setback is technically what would be required under the R1 zoning because it's an average of the lot width, and the lot width ranges from 0 to 58 and some change. So 3 foot would be allowed. Project information. This is the ground floor. It's 276 square feet. It includes a living room, kitchen, full bath, laundry, utility room, and a spiral staircase to the loft bedroom. The second floor, 183 square feet. It's a bedroom and a full bath. It's open to the living room below, and it has a view from the upper level westerly windows. This is the material board. It's brown and dark tan tones with green highlights, and this shows the south elevation and the southeast. This is the bluff setback. The rainbow-colored line is the top of bluff, the determination from 2021. The red line in the middle is the 20-foot building setback buffer, and the 50-foot setback is shown in yellow. And the difference between the 20 and the 50 is a height limitation. So you can have a building in that area, but the height is restricted based on the type of roof. Here's development standards. This is the R1 PD standards, and this is the proposed home. And as you can see, they are asking for 2 feet in 3 locations on the property where there's pop-outs for reduced setbacks. So the 3 feet is what they have. There's 3 sections where they had the building pops out for building articulation, and they're asking for a variance of 2 feet in those locations. I wanted to mention that the bluff buffer where there's no structures, there's a small portion of the west wall of the home that is within the 20-foot top of bluff. There is a section in the municipal code that allows average bluff edge elevation determination. It's typically used for determining height issues related to distance from the bluff. And then the development standard on the bottom, the height between the 20 and the 50-foot buffer is allowed to be 14 feet or up to 17 feet for 412 pitched roof. And in this case, they have a shed roof that is 112 pitch, and there is a section of the building between the 20 and 50 that is ranges from just under 14 feet to just under 17 feet, and they're asking for a variance to allow that. So here's the variance request: parking and side yard setbacks, 1 surface parking space instead of any garage parking. Second variance request is a reduced north and south setback. 3 foot is what would be determined, and they're asking for an allowance to allow 2 feet in the building pop-out sections. Roof height in the 20 to 50-foot buffer area. As you can see, the 20-foot buffer setback is in red, And the 50-foot is in yellow on the left. And the blue square indicates the roof that exceeds 14 feet. So it goes from slightly under 14 feet to slightly under 17 feet. But technically, it's not allowed because it's not a 412 pitched roof. So they're asking for an exception to allow this roof. And as you can see from the floor plan, to put a pitched roof on this would take some of the head space on the interior levels. And just as of note, the width of the home ranges from 4 feet at the easterly end to about 11 feet on the westerly end. Also, consideration for screening trellis structure located on the northerly property line for privacy and screening headlights from cars on the access easement. And this shows some images on the left of concepts that would be used. So there's very little structure visually, just something for the vines to climb on. And then on the elevation on the right, it shows the placement of the structure, which ranges from about 5 feet in height to 8 feet in height from the retaining wall that is stair-stepping down the hill. Summary of the project request: the general plan and the local coastal plan land use policy LU 1.6 is applicable to this application. The policy is to remove barriers to and create opportunities for innovative or non-traditional housing forms such as tiny homes, co-housing, and intergenerational housing. The exterior finishes allow the new house to blend into the trees and the shadows above the bluff and fit into the neighborhood, meeting the intent of the residential design guidelines. And staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the project by adopting Resolution 05-22, which includes the findings and the conditions of approval for the project.
Thank you, Nancy. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Mike, start with you. No? Bill?
Nancy, the piece of the roof that's restricted, if that was to be lowered, what does that do to the clearances in the second floor? In other words, if that was to comply,
Right.
how much space do you lose?
I think the architect or the representative is here, and they probably
So I should
can
ask
answer
him?
that. Yes.
Okay. And then I want to be super clear on this. The pop-out is only 12 inches,
Yes.
and it looks like on the thing, they're roughly like 7, 8, something like that. And so that's the only piece that's into the set, that's asking
Well,
for
there's, technically, you look at the pop-outs both on the first and the second floor. So
Yes.
there's 2 on the north side of the second floor and 1 on the south side
And
on
they
the
both
ground
go,
floor.
they both go first, second floor, all 3 pop-outs.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Asia, do you have any questions for staff?
I do. So, first of all, I checked out the site, but I'm having kind of a hard time picturing exactly where the building would be. Currently, I'm guessing it would be on the paved area where there's pavement, but there's also a tree that looks like a very big old tree that potentially stabilizes that bluff, and I'm wondering how that might be impacted. Maybe the applicant can answer that question. And then I had a question about the pop-outs on the north side, and if how those pop-outs might, even though they're very small, might interact with. I believe that little easement roadway there is potentially for boats going down, and just wanting to know if the setback would be enough to avoid any kind of interaction between vehicles going around that curve.
The easement is 17 feet. It's had the luxury of using some of this property for years. So where the easement curves from the kind of direct connection to Main to go down along the bluff. At one point, that was paved, and that became kind of a larger section of what people thought was the easement, but it was this private property. They can talk more about it, but I think they're removing one tree, and I think they're relocating a telephone pole in order to accommodate the site. But Asia, it's very hard to find. It took, we've been working on this since 2019. It was hard to imagine that there was a site there. And when you went there and you looked at it, you couldn't see how that could be possible, since there's a chain link fence for the neighbor's property and there doesn't seem to be anything else there. So once we discovered that it was actually part of what people thought was the easement, then it became much clearer that that's really where the house is going, and the majority of those trees are on the neighbor's property.
I see. Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Is that it, Asia? For now?
I think so, yes.
All right, thanks. How about you, Joe?
Nancy, there's actually two formulas, if you will, for determining where that 20-foot border for the bluff is, one being more liberal than the other. Would you know if any of the other neighbors to the south, if they conform to the more restrictive one or to the more liberal one? It's probably an unfair question to ask, but
It's hard to tell. I think the homes are old enough that they were built close to the street. A lot of them are not oriented towards the bluff or the ocean or the view. They actually have windows facing the street and vehicular garages and other uses in the back. And in the 20s and 30s and 40s, people put the houses close to the street.
okay.
So I don't, probably newer houses, and I think there are some newer houses from the mid-2000s that are north of this, but not south of it.
And I noticed today that there were two trees, so one closer to the water and one almost at the very eastern part of the property. So which one tree is going to be removed, and or was I wrong on that?
Well, I'll let the applicant's rep talk about it, but I believe that they're removing only what is necessary and nothing below the bluff.
Okay, thank you. This is a really fascinating project. Why don't we bring up the applicant architect first for public comment and then open to general public comment?
Good evening. I'm Bob Kreiser Design Company. And just so you know, I'm not a licensed architect. We have a design company and we have engineers stamp our work. This project, as Nancy mentioned, has been a long process. The planning staff has worked with us to try to refine this project to be something that would be approvable. And after 4 years of effort, we've finally got to a point where we're here to see you. The project is, it meets all the rules. Yes, there's an issue with the pitch on the roof, but the loft that was shown on the property, on the upper floor, is open to below because the roof drops low enough that you couldn't run the upper floor all the way out. So that's part of why there's a loft up on the upper floor. It's probably one of the more complex projects we've had to push through permits. Obviously, the property size is a big issue. Bluff setbacks are a big issue, and parking is an issue. So when we talk about parking, well, at least during the construction process, I'm associated with several of the neighbors, and we will probably negotiate parking for our guys off the site. I designed and built 221, 219, and 217 Main Street, which is basically, there's a small white house across the easement, then there's a two-story house at 215, and then it was 217, 19, and 21. The bluff setback that we were required to meet at that time was out in space. It wasn't even on the property. So presently, we're meeting a bluff setback that actually is from the bluff plus 20 feet. But it wasn't very long ago that we got it approved to build based on a bluff setback out in space. So it would be reasonable to feel that we've got the bluff setback issue resolved. The height of the building, basically we're doing a cut to be able to get the heights down. And on the east end of the property, the building essentially will stick up about 12 feet above the neighboring property. That will be the height of the roof because we're making that cut and building a retaining wall. Then we're going to plant the vegetation, which will also consume 6 or 7 feet. So the visual presentation on the east end going towards the west starts out at approximately 5 feet above this landscape vegetation. The grade basically before we make the cut is at about 141, and the house floor plan elevation, the lower floor, will be at 34.5, so we are pushing the house down to be able to meet the height setbacks and to benefit the neighborhood, trying to keep the house as low impact as possible.
How are you doing that when you say push the house down?
Well, we're actually making a cut and building a retaining wall, so the house is down below grade when we cut it in.
The house will go how far below grade?
Approximately 5 feet, 4.5 feet below grade. So we've pushed it down to be able to meet this and be able to get that extra floor upstairs.
Does that show in any of the drawings?
Yes, yeah, that's all on the drawings. Yep. Basically the height at the east end was because of that loft. We wanted to be able to have the second story, but we knew we couldn't have it the full height, so the pitch dropped down, and we now have a loft that overlooks the lower floor, but it doesn't have a full height ceiling when you measure it from the upper floor level. The working through this project has really given us a look at what the planning the planning department can work with us on. And after 4 years of an amazing dance with a great set of planners, we've been able to get it to the point where we believe it works for the neighborhood. The height issues, once again, I built 3 houses, 2 doors up the street. All of them fell into that height issue requirement, and we are meeting that requirement on this project too. I'm sure there's going to be concern that somebody is building a house 2 stories, but right behind the one across the easement is 2 stories, and all 3 of the next ones up the hill are 2 stories. So we believe, and all of those projects went through planning and planning commission and was all approved with their heights and their setbacks and their presentation. So I'm very graciously asking that you support the opportunity for Sandy Bean to be able to have this home on the property. Any questions?
I think what we'll do is continue with public comment, if you can stay in the audience, and then if we do have questions, we'll call you back.
Okay.
Thank you so much. All right, any other public comment?
Hi, I'm Bruce Foster. I'm one of the property owners at 201 Main Street, and I own the marina that's just down below this property. And we're against it. This is, where are they going to stage their building materials without impacting our marina people that are renting down there? We have 3 houses currently down there that are rented full time. We have 4 liveaboards. We have 21 other slips, and they're 100% occupied. One of my concerns is where they're going to stage. That footprint is so small, they're not going to be able to stage on the lot. They're going to have to stage on the street, and that's going to impact our tenants coming up and going down to the marina, which is going to have an impact on our day-to-day operations and probably our economic operations. You know, we pay a lease to the city for the water lease, and if our people aren't able to access their boats, they're not going to pay us. We won't be able to pay the city. So the grading of the lot, the staging of materials, the parking of the construction crews. There's 4 parking spaces up there right now that's used as overflow parking for the marina, and it's used for overflow parking for the neighborhood. Okay? I guarantee you those construction crews are going to be parked in there, or they're going to be staging trusses, lumber, plumbing material, and if not, it's going to be staged on city property, which is going to be a liability, or it's going to be staged on private property right there. And it's not going to be our private property because we own that white house there too. So then the other issue is the emergency vehicle access. When you take that curve right now, it's very tight. We've had 2 emergencies down there where it was hard for the vehicles to get down. And when there is that building's there, it's going to be almost inaccessible for any emergency vehicle to go down. That lot 1, was sold to the marina back in 1970 by Union Oil, and it was sold specifically for emergency vehicle access because they could come around, turn, and go down. And, without that, it wasn't sold as a residential lot. It wasn't a buildable lot. It was sold strictly for emergencies. The other issue is when we have our tenants coming up the hill from down below and somebody coming off of, can I keep going?
If you could finish up in just, maybe 20 more seconds.
When they come down the hill or pull off of Main Street and they come head to head, currently they pull over to where the house is going to be built next to that fence to allow them to pass. What's going to happen, whoever pulls off Main Street is going to have to back up now around a blind corner, back out onto Main Street to let the other vehicle pass, which is going to be a hazard. So I don't think there should be any variances allowed on the setback, the bluff, property line, roof height, parking. I don't think this is good for the city, and I don't think it's good for the neighborhood, and we're going to fight it to the end. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Foster. Do we have any other public comment?
Hi there. I'm Dean Marchant. I also own the marina at Bayfront Marina with the Foster family. I'll make this real quick. This took 4 years to get this far for a reason, because it's a disaster. It's putting a round peg in a square hole. I understand we need more housing. I understand that we have issues with we need more places for folks to live. Sandy currently lives in the warehouse right below. She'll be moving 50 feet up. Before that, she lived on a boat down there. So we're not providing any extra housing. I just want to make that perfectly clear. You mentioned the luxury. This property's had the luxury of using this lot. The real situation is that we don't have the luxury. The property doesn't have the luxury. It's the city of Morro Bay and the tenants and the boat owners down there and the water lease, which is owned by the city of Morro Bay, that we pay $33,000 a year for that. So when people come around, they see there's a car will swoop into that area. Bruce Foster mentioned backing up into the street, because it's very congested, you'll have 100 people come through there in a single day on a Saturday. Now you're going to take and put a building right on the lot line to where not only are people going to back out to the street, but they can have to back down, and it already happens without this situation here, but they could back down the bluff theoretically fall down on a house or anyone else down there. So the project is silly. Sorry, I'm unprepared. I just found out about this meeting. But I personally think it's silly. Whether I own this marina tomorrow or any time in the future, this is a silly project. It has nothing to do with my financial gain. This isn't about anything like that. But as a real estate broker and developer for 30 years, if anybody wants to walk down there and take a look and say, this is a great idea, I'd love to meet them down there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marchand. Next up.
Good evening. My name is Gene Dowdy. This may take a little longer than 3 minutes, but Sue Foster will give me her time also. Chairman and Commissioners, my name is Gene Dowdy, 201 Main Street. I rent the Marina Workshop down below in the waterfront zone. I have driven up and down that narrow, steep driveway for close to 50 years. I have known Sandy for several years, since she has moved into what is now her real estate office next to my shop. We talked last week, and she asked me not to say anything to this commission as she was afraid that my comments may change your view. I told her that I had some concerns and that they need to be addressed, but I would not talk about the aesthetics, the size, or the bulk of this project, as the city needs to consider the entire site, and that it has frontages on the bay site, that it would not only this proposal would not only be appealable to the Coastal Commission, but that I believe it would have to get a Coastal Commission permit, as well as providing lateral access per section 17.48.280. I also expressed my views as to the integrity of the author of these plans, and in fact, she called me yesterday and told me that she also has some current concerns, and asked me if I'd be interested in being the contractor. I declined. At one time, a number of years ago, I had designed a small one-story cottage on that site. But after reviewing the detrimental effects that this project could have, and providing no public access, no public benefit, we scrapped that project. I do have some concerns and comments, and I'd ask for a condition to the proposal. As to variances, a variance is not a half dozen variances, but a variance must meet all three requirements to be valid: topographical, and clearly this narrow site meets that requirement. Hardship, I see no hardship here. I understand that she has spent money for this proposal, but this is a business investment, not a guarantee or approval. And then the third reason for a variance would be equal rights as to her neighbors. If all the neighbors were the same size, shape, then she should be given the same privileges. But they are not. That's not the case here. Just because you meet one of the reasons for a variance does not give you the right to comply. It does not give you the right to the other two reasons for a variance. To build on that premise is to build on a weak foundation of both planning and permitting. The proposed reduction of minimum 3-foot setbacks to 2-foot setbacks are not architectural features, such as a cornice or an eave of a project. Sue Forrest is going to give me the rest of her 3 minutes there.
I'm not sure we can do that.
I mean, it's not a practice typically.
Pardon?
It's not a practice the Planning Commission typically follows. You get your 3 minutes and sometimes a little bit more, but that's about it typically. But it's up, I mean,
Yeah,
to the chair.
could you maybe wrap it up in maybe a minute?
I'll do the best I can.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, let's look at some of the height variances. All the neighborhood meet the height restrictions, and the size and shape of this parcel does not allow for the variances. The required slope of a 4 and 12 pitch on the setback is not designed. There is an existing utility line that crosses over this particular parcel, and its elevation is about 12 feet high. Talking with PG&E, they require a 12-foot clearance for around their power line. But the real concern is the parking in the drive at this area here. Having driven up and down this narrow, winding drive for close to 50 years, what we have here is a blind corner at the top of the bluff and cliff, and a a blind corner at the drive at Main Street. The proposal to allow a turnaround at the edge of the bluff top across the right-of-way is unpractical and dangerous. The city code requires a minimum of 20-foot setback in front of a garage or parking area to provide such safety. When driving down that steep driveway and meeting an upcoming car, it is required by law that the upcoming car has the right-of-way. In fact, it would be dangerous for asking a car to back down that narrow, winding drive next to the cliff. So that means that the down-driving car needs to back up out onto the main street, and that blind corner does not allow you to see any oncoming cars.
Thank you, Mr. Dowdy. I think we get the challenges with traffic issues, and we will address that.
Okay.
But I think we need to give an opportunity for some other public comment.
One, I would request that a condition of approval be a construction fence be installed along the property line and no blockage of the driveway be allowed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your comments. Do we have anybody else here for public comment? Ms. Winholtz.
Thank you. A lot of good points have been made. It's interesting to note that there are some residential housing down in the Harbor Zone area on this bluff. I'm assuming that those aren't legal or were not permitted. And if that's Ms. Bean's house, then I just wanted to point that out, that there's some previous issue there then. And so I would, according to the email that I sent you, point out that, again, this was never intended to be a buildable lot for homes. It was given for the fuel dock to accommodate a diesel fuel tank back in the 50s. In addition, there was if you were here in the 1995 during the big rainstorm, you know that there was a huge blowout, and I tried to send you a picture of that, which I apologize turned out to be a bit fuzzy because the newspaper's old. But you know that this is an unstable area. So I had not understood that they were cutting down into bluff, which I think makes it even more dangerous. And certainly that retaining wall is in the wrong place and actually is another variance. But I guess staff is asking them to move it, but still it doesn't seem appropriate. For me, the 4 variances, again, are red flags. That's a lot of variances for such a tiny lot. And then for me, the visual resource is a big flag as well. And I quoted for you here from the new general plan, the 3 policies that I think that this project violates. There is no picture in the staff report from Main Street looking out to the ocean, which is a public vista, a public view. That corner is very open right now. People love that view. And to have this thing stick up, there is no view from Main Street to see what that would look like, as well as things that you have to consider here. Let's see. I was wondering if, because the city does have that right-of-way down the street, or down the easement, has that been surveyed? Do we know exactly where the boundary is between the city easement and the private property? There was issues of that 20 years ago when people were using that as parking. And at one point it was posted no parking, but I know it's gone back to being parking. So there is many traffic issues there. I guess the last thing I would say is I do believe in small houses. I believe in doing that, but this isn't fitting into the lot. It's a squeeze. And unfortunately, like the 3 houses that Mr. Kreitzer built just north of there, they're very tight. They're very close together. It blocked all view, and it looks crunched. And so I think this would add to the unattractive area of this if this were allowed. And I hope you will not approve it.
Thank you, Ms. Winholtz. Do we have any other public comment in the audience?
I really was here for a reason, not just to talk about the Vistra plant. I was asked, excuse me just a second. Now I have all my ducks. My name is Terry Simons. longtime local developer contractor. I started building in Morro Bay in the early 80s. I built Bayshore Village, which is just around the corner from this project. I also built Tidelands Park for the city of Morro Bay. I'm a general engineering and building contractor. I'm also a tenant in the marina. I have a 40-foot boat, sailboat, basically right in front of Sandy's office. And she called me up and asked me to come and speak on her behalf. She has an architect, engineer, and contractor. I'm really not going to speak to the building issues per se, but I was concerned when I saw Betty Winholt's Telegram Tribune article, because I was here in the community when that happened, and it is my recollection, I could be wrong, but that the problem that caused the blowout was in fact a failure of the city's drainage facilities up at the top of the hill. And the culvert, if you look at that Telegram Tribune photograph, you can see the broken drainage culvert. It's about a 24-inch culvert. And interestingly enough, the blowout, the failure of the embankment, occurred coterminous with that drainage alignment. There's a drainage easement that goes down through the what's called, I think it's Lot 20 or whatever. And that was what basically failed. Interestingly enough, in the same Telegram Tribune picture, you can see the existing cypress, which remains today, and the majority of the area where the building is being proposed was stable because that had never been excavated, which the city did to put in that drainage pipe. So when the structure upslope failed, all that material that was essentially backfill got washed down and failed. But interestingly enough, the actual building site survived because it was all original compacted material. And that's basically what I'm here to attest to. So, and then one other item came up. There was a letter in the file regarding Mrs. Brebb's house, which is at 191. And her stepdaughter wanted the commission to know that her mother-in-law's view of the rock was going to be obstructed by this project. I brought a couple of Google photographs that show that clearly this project will have no obstruction visually whatsoever from the Brebb's house. And I have those photographs here if you'd like to pass them. I guess you don't have the ability to project them anymore. So there you are, a mighty complex project for such a tiny house.
Very much so.
I don't envy your position in this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other public comment from the floor? AGP, do we have anybody waiting who has called in? All right, sounds like we have no other comment. I'd like to start off with a couple questions for staff. I do believe in the staff report, sort of working backwards, there is a picture of East View from Main Street. You almost don't see that the house is there because the tree's behind it, and it kind of obscures it. And, yes. And then you see the trellis with the plants growing on it. So I think that shows that there's still a fairly good view from Main Street towards the water, at least in that photo. It's just not a terrific photo. Question, and I do think it's a lot of important questions were brought up by the community. Staging materials, that sort of thing. Is there consideration for that, allowances for that? How would something like that be done on such a tiny little lot?
I'm guessing that comes up at building stage. I mean, 4 years to get planning approval and.
And
the contractor spoke a little bit to it, but Bob Kreiser's here in the audience and can speak to it if you want to ask him. Sure, yeah. Because that, I mean, we've discussed that on other projects, even on the Embarcadero. Where's the staging going to be so that traffic can.
As far as staging goes, if you look at the site plan, there's a really good-sized parking area. Mm-hmm. That's where all the staging will be. There won't be anything in the street, and it won't be anything over the property line.
Okay.
As far
Can
as,
you show us where that is?
Yeah, I think,
that's on the site plan. Yeah, there it is. Well, right there. See where that red line is? That whole thing is parking. That's where all the lumber will be staged. So there won't be any staging
That's the flag.
in the public access. Okay? So that's where the staging will be.
okay,
As far as easements go, this property is so small, so congenial, and the site is so rare, it's not going to create any opportunity for anybody with other, easements. And it's zoned single family. Yes, at one point, somebody used it for something else, but it's zoned single family, so it's made for a single family residence to be built there. And as far as the comments about the property up the street blocking all the views, they met the setbacks. They were all approved by the planning staff and the planning commission, and we went forward with what you see there. And I think that's it.
Thank
Well,
you.
parking, once again, while the guys are working there, I'm associated with other locals that own the property, the ones that I built, and some others that will allow me to use parking for my construction zones.
okay. So that would be something you would be working out.
Yep.
Okay. This may be more for staff than you, but I'm assuming that these kinds of plans do go through our fire department as well.
Correct.
So they have basically signed off on it, fire safety during construction, automatic fire sprinklers, carbon monoxide alarms. Did they have any concerns about access to the waterfront? Because that's important.
They did not. I actually spoke with the fire marshal about the project last week, and he did not.
Okay. Does it need a coastal commission permit?
This is a process for the coastal development permit.
Okay.
It is appealable, though.
It is appealable. Okay. Where they're asking for these variances, do they need to provide public benefit? Separate from the fact that it's a housing project?
No, these are straight variance requests.
Okay. That's what I thought. And you mentioned something about likely moving a utility pole. Is that the one they're talking about with the 12-foot clearance concern?
Yes, there's,
Okay.
yep.
Okay. And then just for staff, residential below the bluff down on the waterfront, is that something that's grandfathered in?
It's an office building. It was recently
Okay.
toured by a few of the staff, and it appeared to be an office building.
Okay.
That said, I mean, people live in their cars.
People do live where
There
they
are a
can.
couple of existing residences actually down there.
Existing
as well-
residences.
as well.
I know there's a few of those on the waterfront as well. When they are vacated, will they be required to become something besides?
Typically, they wouldn't be allowed to remain that. That's a non-conforming
Okay.
use.
Okay.
I don't exactly know, what the leases for those sites indicate. So, I mean, it's something we'd have to look into.
Not
That doesn't
really
involve
the
this-
subject of this.
Doesn't involve this project.
Project, just curious. Okay. I think so far those are my questions. Let's go to Joe.
Well, with respect to the trees, how are the trees going to be impacted?
Well, the trees will have to be trimmed as the branches become obstructions, but we're going to work to try to save any trees that can be left on site. But if there's a tree that is in the way, it'll have to be modified. There's one tree for sure that'll have to be modified. And obviously, we're all about trees, and the client will be planting trees right below the parking area to be able to reestablish that consideration, if that is a reasonable thought because of what it might do to the view corridor. So it's something that we'll be working with the staff on to determine whether or not it's important.
Will your excavation below grade, in your estimate, will it be affecting the roots of the tree?
I'm sorry.
In your estimate, I know you're doing below grade excavation.
Yes, at the east end.
Right. And
at the west end, it's at grade.
right. And do you think that might affect the roots of the tree?
Fortunately, the west end is where the tree issue is, so I don't believe it will affect the tree.
Well, I looked at the property. It struck me as if perhaps half of the canopy of the easternmost tree would have to be eliminated. That strikes me as impactful for the tree.
Yeah, that's the tree that probably has to be replaced.
Right.
Yeah, the easternmost tree.
Right.
Yes.
And there, again, you probably, there is no suggestion that the applicant would use this as a short-term vacation rental. This is intended as her residence, is that correct?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Bill, have you got any questions for staff or the? Okay, we'll wait on comments. Okay, Asia, do you have any questions for staff?
I just have a question to clarify the roof variance. So if I understand, the height increase is allowed for certain types of roofs, but this is just a different type of roof. Is that right?
Yes, if it was a pitched roof with a 412 pitch, a 17-foot height roof would be allowed. In this case, this is a more practical roof for this type of structure and allows more headroom on the interior space. Its maximum height is under 17 feet. So they're asking for a variance between the 20 and the 50-foot bluff setback.
So when you say a pitched roof, a 412 pitched roof, like if I'm looking at the houses to the north of that parcel, is that an example of that type of roof?
Probably the majority of the existing houses have pitched roof. I don't know if it's 412 or not.
Okay, I was just trying to
can't
get an
look
idea
north
of
from
what,
here.
idea of what the difference was between those and what the why the pitched roof would be allowable at that height as opposed to other types of roofs.
Yeah, that might be a question for the ages.
All right. Well, I think that's my only question at the moment.
All right, thanks, Asia.
Thank you.
All right, so we will close public comment. We've finished with our questions. Let's start with some discussion on this. Mike, you want to start it?
I was going to ask if we could take a 2-minute break.
You know, that's actually a good idea. We've been here for a little while. Why don't we take maybe a 5-minute stretch? And yes.
we did that last year.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
And we'll do it again this year.
It was super interesting. It was like my favorite.
All right, I think we're ready to reconvene. So we're going to start with comments and discussion on this project, and I think you
Bill's
are
ready.
ready to start.
So when I reviewed the drawings, it's an intriguing site effort. And I think like everybody else, I had to see the site to sort of understand it. I want to say I admire your struggle to the owners of the site, to the building designer, to city staff. The reason it took 3 years, I think someone commented, a tough project. For me, the site is awkward. And it's clearly awkward. I've been doing this for a lot of years, Planning Commission. And there are times when things don't fit. I look and I try to see where this would fit, and it's really, really hard. The CPC, the City Planning Commission, we have to take into consideration not just the minimum that meets the law, but we have to take in consideration the neighbors, the impact on the public way. I think the integrity of the city. So as much as I admire your efforts for the building designer, I think the houses down the street that you did previously are a struggle too. They seem crowded and they're trying too hard. When I think of the integrity of Morro Bay, we're moving not from unusual and awkward situations. We want to have a grace about our neighborhood and a respect for the past. That's one of the jobs of this Planning Commission. I look at the awkwardness of this, and I'm struggling. I think I wish you had done a rendering that maybe showed from the street, that showed the context a bit better. Some of that might have helped, but I still come back, at least for me, in my opinion, that the public benefit isn't there for the variances, so I think I would not be willing to approve them. I think the way that the building has to fit into the site, as admirable as the effort is, I don't think it's good for the neighborhood. I don't think it fits the street. It's got too many things that it's trying too hard at in too many ways. I'm concerned about the bluff in the edge. I'm concerned about the harshness as it sits on the site adjacent to the public way. And I don't think I can approve the higher roof. So I'll be anxious to hear how my other commissioners feel. I think this doesn't fit on that corner and that site. It's an important edge to the bluff, and it's really, from what I can see, it's not really a building site.
Thanks, Bill. Joe, you want to go next?
Again, a very, very challenging location. And my sympathies are with the applicant, given the difficulties of the location. But my rationality doesn't really support the project. I'll go in detail. You can make the argument with respect to compatibility that there are numerous second-story houses to the south. But this particular proposal is absolutely unique. I dare say you could not find a house like this anywhere in Morro Bay. So it's very difficult for me to buy the notion of compatibility in this particular instance. I've mentioned the issue with the trees, perhaps not one of the most important problems with the property, but a significant public benefit that people utilize and benefit from every day driving through the neighborhood. The issue of it being a small house and perhaps affordable housing, that too is a stretch for me. When you will look at what the square footage cost for this house will be, and certainly if a successor ever comes to own the house, this certainly won't fit my notion of what affordable housing would be here in Morro Bay. And ultimately, though, for me, it comes down to what's fair to the applicant here who's purchased this property. And that, to me, revolves around what reasonable expectations were at the time of purchase and what notice was had or constructive notice that should have been had. And when I know that it was never intended as a residential lot, I don't believe very many people have ever had an expectation that it would be a residential lot, and that a variety of exceptions are required to implement the applicant's proposal. An exception for the roof, and an exception for the setback, an exception for parking, and indeed even an exception for the particular foundation close to the bluff. I'm forced to conclude that the applicant assumed a certain risk that he or she might not be able to implement exactly what she planned. And I think that's the case. And the option is now to go back and rework the plan and perhaps eliminate some of those necessary exceptions, or perhaps to look elsewhere to build that home. I can't support this project.
So public comment is closed. I'm sorry. How do we feel about reopening public comment so the owner can speak?
Based upon what the owner just said, I would be willing to go back to public comment to listen to the owner. It sounds like she did not know when she was supposed to speak legitimately, so I'd just be willing to give her that opportunity.
So I'm looking at head nods.
Okay,
We're comfortable with that.
Mhm.
So you may come up to the podium, and we'll have 3 minutes.
Mhm.
That's okay.
It's just, a zero to the left with this sort of thing. I want to thank you very much for allowing me to do this. And I'll make it quick. I sold 2 properties to buy this one, partially because of the house plans that had been drawn by Gene Dowdy for this particular location. But at the time, Gene Dowdy was too busy to talk to me. And Bob Kreiser and his team and the city, as you heard before, we've been working on this for 4 years. And during the time, we found out that the bluff line that was used for the neighbors in the north was changed. So it was moved east, and it minimized this house to the 776 square foot space that we're looking at. There are pictures showing this home from Main Street, but the truth is it's so small because the color of the home is dark and the trees behind it are also dark. You can't really hardly see it. And chances are very high nobody will even know the home is there. I mean, because of a 276 square foot footprint, a person will practically have to open the door and walk in sideways with furniture inside. I mean, you know what size of home that is. And I know that nobody wants anything built there. I knew it would be difficult. I expected all the neighbors to come and be against it. But the truth of the matter is, I also know that none of the neighbors would want to buy a piece of property and pay taxes for a property they can't use. And I respectfully request everybody's support because they would want to be supported too. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. We will close public comment again. And we'll note that we did have several emailed public comments that were positive about the project. So back to discussion. I guess I'll do what I usually do and go last, but go ahead, Mike.
You could go to Asia first, and then I'll...
Sure. Asia, do you have some public or some comment, discussion?
Yeah, thanks. This, like everyone has already said, is such a difficult thing to assess and make a comment on. But I really want to emphasize that as the entire state and as the city of Morro Bay tries to increase housing and increase availability of all different kinds of housing, that we're faced with some really uncomfortable situations. Like, in order to build more housing, we have to change how some of our neighborhoods look to some degree, and what our expectations of what a house looks like and where houses are. And we have to reanalyze what it means to have density in our neighborhoods. And I see this, you might not be able to call it an affordable home, but I see it as adding to the housing stock and creating density. And if we, if planning research has showed out or demonstrated anything, is that increasing housing stock has an impact on housing affordability in general, countywide. And so I think that I guess I'm hoping that we can find some kind of compromise, whether it's with the design or some of the variances. But my main concern about this is actually more about the stability of the bluff and the safety of the area. But as far as it being a house and a house that feels awkward, I think that that is just not my main concern in this situation. My main concern is about housing and beginning to look at how we can deal with our discomfort around dense housing. And so I feel really torn. I feel supportive of this project, but I also am wondering if there's any compromises that can be made for the some of the variances. So that's just my initial comments for now.
Thanks, Asia.
And now I'm ready.
Okay, Mike.
The reason I wanted to hear Asia is because I've been doing this for 10 years. And in the past, whenever you issued a variance, you had to have something. You'd have to get something for that. Here we're issuing 3 or 4, right? Which is, you want even more. You had to really meet a high bar to get one, let alone 3 or 4. But times have changed. We just heard Asia say, I come from a place, Silicon Valley, where they're building denser and denser and denser housing because that's what the governor wants. That's what the residents of California want. So I've got to get out of that old mentality, and maybe I listen to Asia because I was torn, because I hear what Bill says, because he's been doing it for a long time, and we have to find some more benefit in when you're giving away a lot, especially in these variances. So the middle ground for me would have been if we could get one of the two variances out. I could probably buy that. We only had 2 variances versus 4. And then we had another home. See, I'm dealing with remember, I was the one pushing housing when, as a the Planning Commission has its primary goals and objectives that we moved up to the council, right? And what was one of them? Housing. I'm stuck. So I just wanted to hear, especially from Bill, having that same experience I have, and the people who live here, like Joe, and another perspective, like Asia, because I come from a different place. So now we get to hear from Susan. But I'm just saying, because I totally agree with old school, but I totally got what Asia's saying, because I was feeling it. I was feeling my housing desire.
Mm-hmm. So for me, I was kind of excited about this project. I thought it was a very creative use of the lot, which when I saw it, I'm still not quite sure I can visualize, but I believe you. You've drawn it out. You know, it's there. I think the spaces and the levels are interesting. I think, again, I agree, and that visualization from Main Street, it's hard to see it because it's a dark house, it's behind a tree, or the tree's buffering it. So the height is kind of almost eliminated. Whatever changes those might be in the roof issues, to me, because of the natural foliage, you aren't going to feel that impact so much. Bluff issues are always a concern. I think we have those challenges, but it's also built into our process that we have engineers and soil scientists have to provide reports to make sure that that's protected. So, sadly, as you put more and more money into this project, if you were to get to that point where a soils engineer came back to you and said, sorry, it's a no-go, that's a no-go. But these are safeguards that are built in to the process. You can get bad news, or hopefully you can get good news on it. So that part doesn't worry me. I'm one of those people that feels like we need to be more concerned about housing for humans than for cars. So parking, you've created quite an area of off-site parking. Somebody I was talking with in the public said, well, what if she has a party? And I thought, well, in that little house, you're probably going to go rent a space somewhere else to have a party, or go to their house. It's just not, you're not going to have a party there. But I think also, likely, we all need to learn to be good neighbors. We all need to learn to be considerate of each other's spaces and access. So it's different. It's a challenge. To me, I found it more interesting and exciting than I did, as a red flag. I think the safety issues are built into the process and will be cared for. I think the access issues, in terms of staging and all that, it sounds like you guys have thought that through, where things will be. If fire and police have said they are not concerned with the access, to me, those are the experts in that. So I would take their word for it. So that's kind of where I stand with it.
Can I just add one little thing, Susan?
Sure.
Whenever I found myself here, I'd always defer to staff, because member staff had to do a lot of
intense
heavy lifting and a lot of work to get us here. Mm-hmm. So I'd always go back to staff and say, okay, help me out, staff. Right? I'm in the middle. So I would defer to staff's recommendation, but what I'm doing as a planning commissioner is saying, well, can we get rid of a variance or two? So see, I'm just trying to.
So I'm not, if one is parking.
Yeah.
That's not
Yeah,
possible.
which I
To
didn't
build
really.
a garage,
yeah,
I don't think
yeah,
is an
yeah.
issue there. And I think we all would probably agree.
An except, or what Joe says, an exception. Can we deal with one of the exceptions?
Maybe before we start to
Sure.
parse it,
Yeah, sure.
let me add one more piece of discussion.
Okay, go for it.
I'm aligned with Joe because this is not affordable housing. This is not a precedent that would set anything good. In fact, I think it's the exact opposite. I think the lots that were built up the street were too small, and even though they're to the letter of the law, what happens is it's not a density, it's a lack of fabric. And I find it to be not the forward way I would look for Morro Bay. I think we're getting more sophisticated, not less. Density is a sophisticated process, which actually requires more response. It requires more public benefit in thoughtful ways. The problem with this site is it's too small to offer anything. And it's because it was never intended to be a building site. Nobody would ever design it to be a building site like that. It's a remnant. And so what happens is, even though with all the fantastic efforts, I don't think it has the ability to show the public benefit that this commission has always expected from other projects. When we work with other projects, we're ready to give, variances if they respected the bluff, if they found ways to do landscaping, if they found ways to make it contribute. And I have to say, the fact that you don't see the house, that's not true. When you come down Main Street, you're going to see the long side of a house that's only 500 square feet, but it's going to look like a normal house. So I love the sentiments I'm hearing. I don't think they fit the site. And the argument I would make is to go back to the fact that, again, Joe said it well. That site was pretty apparent from the beginning that it was going to be a tough project to build on.
Could I ask staff, when commissioners are suggesting that it wasn't meant to be a housing site, it's zoned R1.
So yeah, I mean, I know where you're going with it, Chair Stewart. So there's nothing to suggest. I mean, folks said that it was meant to be used for something else or whatever it is. The fact remains that it's zoned residential. And so that you own the property, if you can get something that fits there and come through a process like this, you can build a house on it. You can comply with development standards. That's the issue in front of the commission. It seems to be one of the biggest ones. Not just that, but neighborhood fit as well. Always a concern when you're asking for several variances. So all, pertinent topics to what's in front of you. But the fact remains, it's residentially zoned. It might have been something that was split off from something else before. Hard to say because it was subdivided so long ago. But yeah, it remains residentially zoned, and you can put a residential house on there, assuming you can get through this process.
And it's our job to sort of understand, is that supportable, right? In other words, does it support the neighbors and the city and,
I think all of those, as with every decision that you make, all go into making up the decision-making process for the Planning Commission. You look at all of those things every time a project comes in front of you. I don't think that anything any of you said is wrong or off the mark. I think you're all talking about things that are important related to housing, neighborhood fit. All of those things come into this, and you have to weigh the pros and the cons, like you do with every project. This one just happens to be asking for a lot of things, but it has a lot of constraints, to make housing there. So if you guys can work together to come to some sort of, conclusion about where you want to go with it or direction with the applicant or that type of thing, good. If you can't, then you can't approve the project, then so be it. They'll have the opportunity to appeal to City Council. The good thing is you provided a lot of good feedback, so if that's where it ends up going, the City Council will understand that the Planning Commission vetted this well, provided good comment, good reasoning for whatever the decision-making process is, either way, because it doesn't cost anything to appeal it, so it might be appealed one way or the other. So I appreciate the commentary overall.
Thank you. Yes, Joe.
And I would remind the other members of the commission that in my remarks, I even suggested that the applicant should perhaps go back and reconsider the design and perhaps could remove some of the requested exceptions. I say that because we should all be aware that if this was simply a matter of black-letter law, that no exceptions were being asked for, he would be quite well within his rights to, she would be quite well within her rights to build this home on this tiny lot. But that's not the case. There is a great deal of discretion here because of those exceptions, and it's our responsibility to responsibly address those discretions.
Asia, I don't want to leave you out of the loop. Do you have any more comments?
Just the last thing I wanted to put in our brains going forward as we, this is a really great and important discussion, because I imagine that as, new state laws allow for parcel divisions in the city, this isn't the only small, forgive the labeling, but like slightly awkward parcel that we might have to consider. So I think it's a good way to start.
Aren't divisions subject to thresholds, subdivisions?
Yeah, and I think what Commissioner King's referring to is really probably SB 9. In fact,
Yeah.
if you take a single-family residential lot subdivided, you end up with pretty small lots that result from that, and then would end up with some weird configurations, because a lot of that is dependent on kind of how the existing lot's configured and where the house will be located. But you still have setback requirements, minimum ones that you have to adhere to on this point.
So we have had a lot of really good discussion. I know this group tries really hard to get to a yes or get to a solution. Do we feel, so basically looking at the variance requests, we've got the parking, and I think we have some precedents for not requiring covered parking in a number of situations. So I would think we're probably all pretty comfortable with, Bill's sort of not quite there, but I see some head nods that the parking is not a thing to die on here. Okay.
Chair Stewart, do you mind
Asia.
if I just review the variances real quick for you?
That would be great.
Okay, so the parking you've talked about, and so it's not requiring a garage, it's requiring surface parking, and the house is under 500 square feet, and we have zoning districts that allow one parking space for homes that are under 1,000 square feet.
Okay.
The next variance is the side yard. And the side yard is really only a variance where there are pop-outs, because it meets the criteria for a 3-foot setback. So in 3 spots, 1 on the ground level and 2 in the air, it extends further into the setback by 1 foot. The height restriction is, we allow 17 feet. And it's not 17 feet. It's just a style question about the roof, which is probably outdated, or somebody's subjective opinion on roof style. But it's not about the height. It's about the type of roof that is on the house.
Okay.
And then the final one is the trellis. And the trellis is allowed in the new zoning code. It specifically calls out and allows a trellis up to 10 feet that is a decorative feature. And the trellises, other than along the easement area, we are going to meet the fencing height requirements and setback from the bluff.
That's really helpful explanation.
Yes, Susan, and I was going to ask a favor of my fellow planning commissioner, Joe, because I think he's right where, in the middle of where we're at. Like, I think you have a recommendation, Joe, that you're willing to put forward. And I just feel it, and let's see how that goes, because I think you're on both sides. Right?
Well,
That's what I felt.
I'm clearly mulling this. I'm
Okay.
not prepared at this point yet to.
Okay.
Again, yes, I mean, there are, I'm listing the 4 variances.
But it's more than just 4 variances, right, Joe?
It is, but it isn't. I mean,
Legally is what we have to look at.
But I'm also-
What's by our codes and,
but I am looking at the totality of the variances, which is what bothers me. And that's perhaps a backward or left-handed way that my brain is telling me that perhaps this project isn't particularly appropriate for that spot because there are so many variances. And I'm not comfortable with a conclusion that if we can eliminate 2 of the setback problems, and we all agree that, parking is a plague rather than a privilege in Morro Bay, and I'm not sure that accomplishes what we need to accomplish.
well, I also
And
think.
I will say, and this is, I've been on the Planning Commission now for, probably 6.5 years, and this is without question the most difficult one that I've faced. Usually I do not have a problem making my mind up and adequately convincing myself of the justification for it. I am having a problem here.
It's interesting.
Well, I think we haven't talked, at least in our discussion, we had several people speak to the loss of the easement in terms of the turn on that road. And I did drive down to the marina, and I'd have to say their concerns are very real. Again, for me, it's a little bit like you, Joe. I think you could meet the letter of the law. I don't think in this case that's necessarily a good thing. And there's too many signs to me, the variances, the impact on the easement in the street, the fact that there's no room to really do landscape, and you have to sink the house so deeply. I looked down at the other houses that the building designer did, and I'm not necessarily thinking that's a good neighborhood that they're building. I guess I would go back to the Planning Commission being responsible for that bigger vision of where Morro Bay goes as a city. What happens to that piece of neighborhood? And so my sense is that all of those things combined show why the project is such a struggle, why it took so many years to design it. And as much as I would like to fix it, I guess my point would be I don't think you do.
Well, Asia, have you got any further comments?
No, it's just really hard.
It's a challenge. For me, I will say even the pop-outs, they don't bother me because it gives some interest and articulation to the building where I wouldn't want to see just flat sides. I think having a little bit of variation on that helps. If it were up to me, I would make the proposal that we go with staff recommendation. I would be willing maybe to look further at landscaping possibilities, if that were something to ask for, especially if we might impact some of the trees there. But I'm not quite hearing a majority on that opinion. So it may be time to go ahead and ask for a motion, and we'll
Happy to make one.
see where it goes from there. And then, depending on how it goes, you can appeal this at the city council level.
The motion I would make is to deny the request for variances and to ask that staff offer our comments to the council for multiple reasons. For me, it's not simply the variances, it's the discussion that we've had that I think is the reason that it's not just the variances, they're part of it, but it's the impact on the street, it's the complexity of the house on the bluff. It's not really affordable housing. I think those comments provide a larger picture. So I would deny the variances with the intent that there would be an understanding for the integrity of development in Morro Bay that doesn't look on just the letter of the law, but looks on building good urbanism, good context.
So do we have a second on that motion?
Yes, I would second that.
All right. Any discussion on the motion?
Can I
Asia?
just make a comment?
Sure, it's discussion.
And I'd say that I'd agree with the motion and say that council will be able to make the final decision based upon our discussion of the many elements we have to consider and the challenges we had. But ultimately, I'd rather the council make that decision.
Pass the buck.
So, but I would agree that my role as a planning commissioner is, as Bill and Joe seconded, is more in the line of what we're doing here, which is denying, but that's as far as I could get. I think the council can go further if they want to, but that's as far as I could get.
Asia, do you have any discussion on this motion?
No, I don't think I do.
The only thing I would add to the comments is I never heard in any of the presentation that this was meant to be affordable housing. It's just small. And so I don't think the applicant was presenting this as, oh, I'm going to build some affordable housing. It was a house, she had the property, wanted to build on it. So I just want to make that clear.
That's true.
That when we look at affordable housing, that's a very different parameter we're looking at. So discussion on that is closed. I guess we will call the roll on that.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
Yes on the motion.
Commissioner Graffia?
Yes.
Commissioner King?
In the spirit of collaboration, I'm going to abstain.
Vice Chair Roshan?
Yes.
Chair Stewart?
No.
Thank you.
All right. That finishes up that item. Moving on to new business, we have nothing listed. And we have nothing under unfinished business. Planning Commissioner comments and future agenda items.
Yes.
I did wonder, and I'll get to you, related to earlier public comment about the Libertine Subcommittee.
I'm happy to meet with, what was her name?
Mike.
Your mic.
Oh, here we go.
I'm happy to meet, and I think we should do it together.
I agree. Scott, so we were just bringing up the Libertine. Sharice had brought that up. Subcommittee, I don't know if we were really a formal subcommittee, but we did.
You are not, because you didn't create one.
Right, we didn't create one, but we did.
So let's not call it a subcommittee.
We
Let's
did
say
meet with.
Susan and Bill.
Yeah, Susan and Bill met with staff and the applicant on that project. So that kind of teamed us up.
Yeah.
So, but we are willing to meet further. I wonder whether with Sharice and Eric, or just one or the other?
I'd love to invite Eric and
I think that's
Cerise.
important.
And
Yeah.
let's meet with Scott. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to schedule the meeting in our conference room if you want. It's fine.
Okay.
I think it's important because there's
Questions and concerns.
good questions there that
Yeah.
need to be discussed.
I will note that this is going to for consent of landowner on the 24th based on the revised plans. That
It's doing what, Scott?
Consent of landowner because it
Goes to
involves
city.
lease sites on the waterfront. The Libertine is going forward to consent of landowner basically
With plans?
Well, they're basic plans, like this is what the thing it's going to look something like this. The consent of landowner simply allows them to submit an application so they can come to planning commission for permits.
So it goes to city council, which is considered the landowner, correct?
Yes.
And then they say, we want to present a plan. And council says, you can present a plan. And then they come back to us
Yes.
with the plan. process. Welcome to Tideland Trust.
Yeah. Waterfront lease stuff is interesting, to say the least. So the quizzical look on Commissioner Roshan's face is justified. I still do that sometimes, and I've been here for a while.
Yep. Yeah. It's
Okay.
convoluted.
All right.
Convoluted.
I'll see if I can't set up a meeting with everybody then. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Any other imminent future agenda items? Yes, Mike.
Susan, we did have a discussion of the subcommittee about a month ago, and Bill did call in for that, and we had asked that the commissioners provide their input. And guess what? We're past that month, so I would like to have the commissioners submit their comments by week's end, and then we can have this calendared for our next planning commission on June 7th. So I did talk to Sean about this, and Joe got the email, but we need to move on, right? We gave a 30-day window. That's up now, so we want public comment, but we want to go back at it on June 7th.
Very sorry about that. I'm
So-
quite remiss.
Is that okay, though?
So Asia, Susan, and Bill commit.
Okay, so by week's end, because that'll give, is that enough time for you, Scott, to get it on the June 7th?
I'm not going to commit to putting it on the June 7th meeting. We have a lot of other things going on right now, so
yeah.
We still should get our stuff in, right?
You should, because
Yeah.
I can't do it if
Until
you don't
we
get
do.
it to
I'm
me.
really sorry.
And that's fine. The only reason I wanted the 7th, I'm going to be honest with you, Scott, because I will not be at the Planning Commission meeting on June 21st, the second meeting. Okay. I will be unavailable. So I was shooting for the 7th, so that means we won't get it till, well, because I got to be part of that.
Right.
Right? So,
And don't forget,
Yeah.
with the way the rules are,
Sure.
you need to request the
Sure.
absence a week ahead.
but
of
it's
time.
looking like I will not. As of
Okay.
right now, I'm telegraphing what's happening with me, that I won't be available the
Okay,
21st.
that's
But
Okay.
and I did see the new rules or whatever, and yeah, I'll do that.
Okay.
All right. All right. Any other future agenda items to bring up at this point? We got nothing. Community Development Director comments.
I don't have anything.
Wow.
I don't.
Anything on zoning?
Zoning. Good question. Thank you. So zoning, where we're at right now is we're waiting for responses from the Coastal Commission.
Still. Okay.
Yeah, on affordable accommodations and environmental justice. They're developing policies on this right now. And we gave them an affordable accommodations policy to look at, and we're hoping to get comments back on that.
Okay.
And as far as the environmental justice piece goes, their sort of white paper that they're getting ready to release hasn't been released yet. But they internally use environmental justice and have an internal memo that they use, and so I think they're sanitizing that for our use so we can put something together. But we're waiting on them. Everything's ready to go. The thing's all teed up, other than those two pieces. So
wow,
we're just waiting. I'm optimistic that we're going to get something back either by the end of this week or beginning of next week on both.
Okay. Fun. All right, then I think we are ready to adjourn this meeting. Our next scheduled meeting is June 7th, 6 o'clock, here at the Vets Hall. We will see you all there, and thank you.
Thank you, Betty.